Welcome all of you. Welcome to St. Paul's College. We are going to start the program. Before that, I introduce our department colleague, Professor CBKM, for the welcome address.
Hello and welcome to all. Because this is the only way we could contribute towards wiping out the COVID pandemic.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Warm welcome to one and all. Honorable resource person, faculty members, scholars, students and friends, thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We are delighted and honored to host the webinar on COVID-19 and macroeconomic uncertainty, physical and monetary response. At the outset, let me give a brief introduction of our institution and the department. St. Paul's College Kalamassery is affiliated to Mahatma Gandhi University, Kottayam. The college started functioning from 13 July 1965. Presently, the college is accredited with A grade in the cycle of re-accreditation by NAAC in 2016. Our mission is to impart excellence in higher education to all, especially the educationally, socially, and financially marginalized communities, and to develop an integrated personality in students. The Department of Economics is a postgraduate department established in 1979. Let me welcome our college manager, Reverend Father Anthony Arakal. Without his constant support and encouragement, this webinar wouldn't have materialized. Welcome you, Father.
Thank you, Dr. Sumita. Now we will have a webinar formally elected by Honorable Minister Nikhil, Minister of Food and Civil Supplies, Government of Kerala. Let us listen to Minister's inaugural address.
ലോകം അതിൻ്റെ ചരിത്രത്തിലെ ഏറ്റവും വലിയ സാമ്പത്തിക തകർച്ചയിലൂടെ മുന്നോട്ട് പോവുകയാണ്. ഇതിനു മുൻപ് 1930കളിലെ സാമ്പത്തിക പ്രതിസന്ധിയെക്കുറിച്ചാണ് നാം പറഞ്ഞു കേട്ടിട്ടുള്ളത്. അതിനേക്കാളേറെ ആഴമേറിയ പ്രതിസന്ധിയിലാണ് ഇന്ന് ലോക ജനത ചിന്തപ്പെട്ടിട്ടുള്ളത്. COVID-19 എന്ന മഹാമാരി ലോകത്തെ ആകെ ഏതാണ്ട് നിശ്ചലമാക്കിയിരിക്കുകയാണ്. വാണിജ്യ വ്യാപാര മേഖല നിർജീവമായി. നമ്മുടെ ഉൽപാദന മേഖല പരിപൂർണമായ നിശ്ചലമായ അവസ്ഥയിലായി. ജനജീവിതം സ്തംഭിച്ചു നിൽക്കുന്നു എന്നുള്ളതാണ് ലോകത്തെവിടെയും കാണാൻ കഴിയുന്നത്. ലോകത്തെ വൻകിട വികസിത രാജ്യങ്ങൾ എല്ലാം ആ മഹാമാരിയുടെ മുമ്പിൽ വിറങ്ങലിച്ചു നിൽക്കുന്ന കാഴ്ചയാണ് നമ്മൾ കാണുന്നത്. എവിടെയും പ്രതിസന്ധിയും പ്രയാസങ്ങളും ഓരോ ദിവസം കഴിയുന്തോറും കൂടിക്കൊണ്ടേയിരിക്കുന്നു. ആ മഹാമാരിയെ എതിർക്കാൻ, അതിനെ നേരിടാൻ, അതിനെ അതിജീവിക്കാൻ നമ്മുടെ രാജ്യവും അതിൻ്റെ ആവനാഴിയിലെ എല്ലാ അസ്ത്രവും ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്ന സന്ദർഭമാണ്. നമ്മുടെ ഈ കൊച്ചു സംസ്ഥാനം ഇക്കാര്യത്തിൽ ലോകത്തിന് തന്നെ മാതൃക തീർക്കുന്നു എന്നതാണ് നമുക്കെല്ലാം അഭിമാനം പകരുന്ന, അതിനേക്കാളേറെ സന്തോഷം പകരുന്ന ഒരു കാര്യമെന്ന് കൂടി ഈ സന്ദർഭത്തിൽ പറഞ്ഞുകൊള്ളട്ടെ. നമ്മുടെ രാജ്യം ഈ പ്രതിസന്ധിയെ മുറിച്ച് കടക്കുക തന്നെ വേണം. അതിനാവശ്യമായ പദ്ധതികൾക്കാണ് നമ്മുടെ കേന്ദ്ര ഭരണകൂടം നേതൃത്വം നൽകേണ്ടത്. റിസർവ് ബാങ്കും അതിൻ്റെ സാമ്പത്തിക സംവിധാനങ്ങളും ഗവൺമെൻറ് കൈക്കൊള്ളുന്ന ഈ മുരടിപ്പ് മാറ്റാനുള്ള നല്ല സാമ്പത്തിക പാക്കേജ് രൂപം കൊടുത്ത് മുന്നോട്ട് പോകുക തന്നെ വേണം. അതിനാവശ്യമായ തീരുമാനങ്ങൾ കേന്ദ്ര ഗവൺമെൻറ് ഭാഗത്തുണ്ടാവും എന്ന് നാം പ്രതീക്ഷിക്കുകയാണ്. നമ്മുടെ ഈ ചെറിയ സംസ്ഥാനത്തും അതിൻ്റെ എല്ലാ അലയൊലികളും എത്തിക്കഴിഞ്ഞു. എന്നാലും ഒരു ഗവൺമെൻറ്റിന് ചെയ്യാവുന്നതിൻ്റെ മാക്സിമം കാര്യങ്ങൾ COVID-19 നേരിടുന്നതിന് ഇവിടെ ഉപയോഗിച്ചുകൊണ്ടേയിരിക്കുന്നു എന്നുള്ളതാണ് എടുത്തു പറയേണ്ട പ്രത്യേകത. എന്നാലും കേന്ദ്രത്തിൻ്റെ നിർലോഭമായ സഹായം ഒരു രാജ്യത്തിൻ്റെ സമ്പദ് വ്യവസ്ഥയാകെ അങ്ങേയറ്റം പ്രതിസന്ധിയിലകപ്പെടുത്തുമ്പോൾ അതിനെ തരണം ചെയ്യാൻ ആവശ്യമായ ഒരുക്കങ്ങൾ നടത്തേണ്ടത്, നേതൃത്വപരമായ പങ്കുവഹിക്കേണ്ടത്, മൂലധനത്തിൻ്റെ എല്ലാ തരത്തിലുള്ള ഒഴുക്ക് എല്ലാ കേന്ദ്രങ്ങളിലേക്കും പ്രവഹിക്കേണ്ടത് നയപരമായ തീരുമാനം കൈക്കൊള്ളേണ്ട കേന്ദ്ര സർക്കാരാണ്. ആ തീരുമാനം ഉണ്ടാവും എന്ന് തന്നെയാണ് നാം പ്രതീക്ഷിക്കുന്നത്. നമ്മുടെ കണ്ണും കാതും വടക്കോട്ട് എല്ലായ്പ്പോഴും ജാഗരൂകമായി നിലകൊള്ളുന്നു. നമ്മുടെ സംസ്ഥാനത്തിൻ്റെ, രാജ്യത്തിൻ്റെ ഈ പ്രതിസന്ധിയെ എല്ലാ വിഭാഗം ജനങ്ങളും ചർച്ചയ്ക്ക് വിധേയമാക്കുകയാണ്. COVID-19 ശേഷമുള്ള ഒരു ഇന്ത്യ, COVID-19 ശേഷമുള്ള ഒരു കേരളം, ഇതെല്ലാം നമ്മുടെ ആശങ്കയുമായി ബന്ധപ്പെട്ട് നിൽക്കുന്നു എന്നുള്ളതാണ് ഇവിടെ ചൂണ്ടിക്കാട്ടപ്പെടേണ്ടത്. ഏതായാലും ഈ മഹാമാരിയെ എതിർത്തോൽപ്പിക്കാൻ വേണ്ടിയുള്ള സർവസജ്ജമായ നമ്മുടെ യുദ്ധത്തിൽ നമുക്ക് വിജയിക്കുക തന്നെ വേണം, വിജയം ഉറപ്പാക്കുക തന്നെ വേണം. അതിന് ജനങ്ങളുടെ ഒറ്റക്കെട്ടായിട്ടുള്ള പടയണി തീർക്കുക എന്നുള്ള ജോലിയാണ് നാം ഇന്ന് ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നത്. കോവിഡിന് ശേഷമുള്ള അതിൻ്റെ സാമ്പത്തിക പ്രതിസന്ധിയുമായി ബന്ധപ്പെട്ട എല്ലാ കാര്യങ്ങളും സർവതല സ്പർശിയായി ചർച്ച ചെയ്യുന്നതിന് കളമശ്ശേരി സെന്റ് പോൾസ് കോളേജിലെ എക്കണോമിക്സ് ഡിപ്പാർട്ട്മെന്റ് മുൻകൈയെടുക്കുകയാണ്. ഒരു സെമിനാർ എന്ന അടിസ്ഥാനത്തിൽ ഈ വിഷയം കേന്ദ്രമാക്കിക്കൊണ്ട് എല്ലാ വിഭാഗം ആളുകൾക്കും അഭിപ്രായ പ്രകടനം നടത്താൻ കഴിയുന്ന ഒരു സെമിനാർ ഇവിടെ സംഘടിപ്പിക്കുകയാണ്. ആ സെമിനാറിന് എല്ലാവിധ ഭാവുകങ്ങളും ഞാൻ നേരുന്നു. ആ സെമിനാർ ഔപചാരികമായി ഉദ്ഘാടനം ചെയ്യുന്നു. നമസ്കാരം.
Thank you.
Thing.
Yeah, sure.
First, each speaker will talk for 20 minutes. First, Lega ma'am, and after that, Emmanuel. So now I'm handing over mic to Lega ma'am. Lega ma'am, you can start.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me, and my special thanks to the principal for. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me for this deliberation. And we are passing through extraordinary times. And it's basically a debate between the life and livelihood that's happening all over the world. And instead of, blindly taking that life versus livelihood and doing the policy sequencing rather than taking an approach simultaneously, we are going to miss the bus. That's the first thing I want to, put on board. Because in the Western or the epicenter of the crisis in the G7 countries, they have gone for this debate of life versus livelihood because of the crisis of the life. They need to put forward and they need to tackle. But in our case, if we are delayed in the way in which we handling the humanitarian crisis which is mounting due to interstate migration and the loss of livelihood of the people around us. Okay, so when we respond to this crisis, a lot depends upon how we are going to float our macroeconomic framework. And if you look at the transition in the macroeconomic framework over the years, you can see that it has transformed or transited from a lot of discretion to the policymakers to strict rules. And in the case of fiscal policy, there is a kind of fiscal rules framework or the FRBM framework on board in which we are not allowed to spend more than 3% of GDP. And that's a big constraint when we talk about, formulating a fiscal policy package in the context of a virus or the coronavirus pandemic. So this is a second point I would like to, keep on board. Like the way I mentioned that it is not a sequential life versus livelihood policy package which we need to frame, but rather we need to take it simultaneously. That's a point number one I flagged. The second point is that we need to think out of box from this rules-based framework in the case of fiscal policy. And here, if you look at the FRBM framework, what we have is an escape clause. And if you are, passing through an unprecedented crisis, or if you are at the receiving end of the unexpected consequence of a public policy, you can invoke your escape clause. But there is quite a bit of ambiguity regarding invoking the escape clause or whether escape clause itself, is there in the case of the subnational government. So there is quite a bit of ambiguity. So in this context, I think instead of going for the retrenchment or the salary cut or that kind of the second wave of fiscal austerity measures, I think what we need to do right now is to think out of box regarding the fiscal policy stimulus and the package. And I quite don't understand why we are still on the denial mode regarding the fiscal expansion and regarding the fiscal policy package to be announced, because what was announced so far, it is very stringent. It was just 1% of GDP. The details of the fiscal package and the monetary package, Dr. Emmanuel Thomas will be talking to us in a few minutes' time. So I'm not getting into the details. The only thing which I want to highlight is that it is not business as usual. We should not be thinking that the stability of the revenue is required for designing our public benefits in the context of a virus pandemic era. It's not the stability of the revenue which is in question right now, because if we are doing the business as usual, we will be quite late in handling this crisis because the humanitarian crisis is mounting. So, what could be that out of box thinking we can do right now in terms of the public policy response? So, to me, I think we need to think about the debt deficit dynamics from a different perspective. So right now, what we are grappling with, it's a level of deficit, and that cannot be more than 3% of GDP. That level of deficit that we need to tackle with. The second is the way in which we are financing the deficit. And I understand that there's quite a bit of, what do you call it? The discussion happened in our state, especially Kerala, when the finance minister was asking about a kind of deficit financing through monetization. And it's not at all a weird thing because it's not only our country, our state is talking about the fiscal policy, monetary policy, coordination in terms of synergy financing the deficit, but this discussion, the re-emergence of the concept of monetized deficit to finance the virus pandemic, it's happening globally. And I attended the American Economic Association conference to present my paper. There, the presidential address by the famous macroeconomist Oliver Branchard, he has flagged this point of the debt sustainability issue. So to him, if the country is in the low interest rate regime, and if your R is not greater than G, that's a real rate of interest, is not greater than the real growth of economy, you should not be worrying about the debt unsustainability at all. So in this case, the re-emergence of how you monetize your the deficit, and it's not weird if you think in terms of the fiscal policy and monetary policy coordination. And the students, if you're interested in knowing this in detail, you can get into this report on currency and finance. That's the last report of the RBI, because after that, after I think this fiscal monetary coordination RCF, we didn't have any RCF after that. But this was quite led by Professor Subir Gokan. His RCF was the best ever. So if you read that document, you will understand the importance of the fiscal policy, monetary policy coordination. But in the context of this crisis, if we are mounting it with the central bank independence, or if you're still grappling with the levels of deficit that we cannot spend more, it's a stability of revenue that is deciding everything, I think we are going to miss this. And another very important thing from the perspective of Kerala, why Kerala has done very well, because it was never top down. The importance of the fiscal decentralization, the importance of the principle of subsidiarity in taking the public policy decisions, that was one of the, the guiding factor, or the factors which led to successful containment of this in the context of Kerala. And when I talk about the principle of subsidiarity, that means you are giving quite the flexibility to take the decisions to the governments which are closest to the people. It's not the personal characteristics of the top leader that decides everything, but you are believing in the institutions and the public policy package that is happening at the levels which are closer to the people. So this principle of subsidiarity, this importance of fiscal decentralization in the context of this intergovernmental fiscal transfer mechanism is quite relevant. And that's another thing. So, what I'm articulating to you is, the first is that we should not be sequential, life versus livelihood. Second, we should not be very stringent in terms of the fiscal hawkish or fiscal conservatism in deciding the things. We should go for the fiscal expansion. And the third point, what I'm highlighting is the importance of the fiscal decentralization in the whole process and giving flexibility, because otherwise the exit strategy we are planning in terms of green, red, or whatever the color, it's going to be quite messy unless we give the principle of subsidiarity the important thing. But I'm not telling like prima facie, like fiscal decentralization is good or bad to contain this, but it all depends upon the way in which the dynamics work rather than the top down approach. And fourth point I would like to flag is the economists cannot take any decision in isolation over here because it's quite contrary to the other macroeconomic uncertainties we faced. Like as Minister rightly pointed out, in the context of the global financial crisis, that was basically an economic crisis. It was a financial crisis. But right now, we need to take high frequency feedback from the public health experts. So it's a lockdown per se is not going to give what we need to achieve, because a lockdown, that of course is the best strategy in which our country responded, but we have not gone for the aggressive testing so far, and we are nowhere near the ballpark. So we are not confident to open the economy. That extra strategy, we are not just confident because we are fearing that another kind of peak, whether it happens in October or in June. So that kind of an uncertainty we have in mind. So in this case, arguing for a complete opening up without the planning, that's going to be quite a bit of uncertainty. And second point I would like to argue is that the lockdown per se is not enough. That preparedness in which we hike up our public health infrastructure and the related spending and the related services, that's quite relevant here. And what kind of preparedness, and we are not aware of that, and that's quite important, because otherwise when the lockdown is over, if you're not ready, and this is the problem in which it's not happened overnight. The way we framed our public policy, we thought that economic growth is our ultimate goal. Maybe that itself contains the seeds of the crisis when we formulate the plans. Because if you are a student from Center for Development Studies, Emmanuel can understand what I'm talking about, because we always think about economic growth with equity. And I know that many of your students right in front of me, you have that background of the heterodox economic thought process, that we have to think beyond economic growth at this moment of time. Because the articulation we hear from Geeta Gopinath or other macroeconomists is that the vision, that stops at the level of what is the drag of this pandemic on economic growth. And they rightly pointed out that it is going to be -3. But we should not be stopping at the, looking only just economic growth. Of course, the economic growth revival is important, and we are looking forward to a V revival. But many economists have predicted that it is going to be L-shaped or a tilted L-shape. But it should not stop there. Its growth with equity should be the policy, guidelines when we put forward the roadmap of the exit strategy. This is the second thing. So these kind of constraints about our policy paradigm, that we are not thinking beyond economic growth. The second is that there is a policy transition that has happened from the discretion of the policy makers to do quite a bit of rules. So these are the existing constraints in which we need to function. I think we need to go out of box, and the sky will not fall if you go beyond the fiscal rules at this moment. I really don't understand why we are still on the denial mode, because I listen to many macroeconomists who still believe that it's a business as usual and we are just beginning our fiscal cycle and we cannot spend much and we are going to get into a debt trap. No, just imagine the counterfactual. The debt and the deficit, we will not be able to, even control if we are not triggering the economic growth and arrest the humanitarian crisis at this moment. And we need to spend. And for that, if a moment you forget about your debt deficit dynamics at this moment, so that in T+N or T+2 or T+3 period, you will not have another debt deficit crisis. That counterfactual, I think we should be quite aware of. It's quite funny the way Ben Bernanke has put it in terms of the financing the deficit, but he called it as helicopter money. But helicopter money, I'm not arguing that you're going to helicopter drop money in the household or the firms to respond to this crisis, but a significant variant of the helicopter money concept, which is put forward by the Ben Bernanke that time was MFFP, that is money financing of the fiscal program. So I think that's much better than going for a financial oligarchy deciding on our schemes. What I mean is that you can finance your deficit through three ways. The first is like what you're doing right now using the bond financing of your deficit. The second is you can go for the internal, the domestic financing using the RBI, the monetized financing. And the third is the external. And I think this is not a moment to go for an external financing and go IMF or that financial oligarchy deciding on the decisions about our country. So what we need to explore right now is to go for the Synerage financing. And Synerage, maybe students are technically interested what exactly is a Synerage. It's nothing but you can estimate by change in your high powered money in the country to GDP. That exactly is a Synerage. And you should be worrying about the inflationary pressures because excessive mode of any financing of deficit, it has its own macroeconomic consequences, but I don't think that it is going to be inflationary at this moment because the economy is in the below potential level. So if you go for bond financing and then you're scared about your pressure on the interest rates, and Emmanuel will be talking about a bit on this, playing around with the repo rates and how we attain the macroeconomic response from the monetary side, and he will be talking a bit in detail. But what I want to highlight is that the monetary policy as a counter-cyclical policy tool may not be that efficient when you compare to your fiscal policy package. Because the monetary policy, you have seen across globe, like if your interest rate is zero bound or if your interest rate is negative, then you are not going to trigger your economy by using your monetary policy tool. So the infusion of liquidity is equally important. And how our country came up with a package 1 and package 2 by the RBI to respond to the crisis. And I think the Emmanuel will be talking about. And I think I will stop here and take your questions later. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you for really engaging and insightful thoughts. And we will deal with the questions later. And
Sure, Sibi.
okay. The next speaker of the day is Mr. Assistant Professor St. Thomas College, Trichy. I welcome you, sir, for the session.
Thank you. First of all, let me thank St. Paul's College for making me a part of this webinar. Am I audible? Congratulations to the Department of Economics, its head of the department, Sumita Franklin, and CB and other faculty members who are making this happen, and also the principal and the management. And a special thank you and congratulations to Justin for organizing this webinar. Let me move on to my presentation. And also, I should say that I'm honored to be part of this webinar where Professor Lekha is a resource person. It's an honor for me to share the dais with her. So let me move on to my presentation. I will start from where Professor Lekha started her presentation, that is the debate around lives versus livelihood. So around the world, the discussion is around this probable trade-off between lives and livelihood. But we should also remember that for a country like India, this trade-off may not last for long, where this lockdown, if it continues endlessly, this loss of livelihood can lead to loss of lives. So probably we are moving to that point, that tipping point where this trade-off might be coming down. The extent of that trade-off might come down. So we have to, as Professor Lekha pointed out, towards the end, we have to have an exit strategy. Slowly, we have to start opening up sectors and open up different regions based on the extent of the infection rates, etc. So with that note, let me quote what RBI governor said a few days back. He characterized this situation as a pandemic superimposed on a slowdown. So the Indian economy was already experiencing a slowdown. And we remember those days when fiscal and monetary policy handles were being used continuously to revive the economy, to revive the growth rates in the economy. You remember, we all remember that there was a package for the corporate sector, taxes were reduced, and the repo rates were reduced continuously by about 135 basis points over 5 monetary policy announcements. But still, the economy was continuing to slide down. And so it was in that context that we were in such a difficult spot. We were hit by the pandemic. So the Indian scenario is very bad, in fact, and the loss of income associated with this lockdown is going to be huge. And in an economy where a significant part of the labor force is in the informal sector, and there is this huge amount of daily wage laborers, and where incidence of poverty is very high, this loss of income and lockdown is mounting into a huge humanitarian crisis. So, as per IMF forecast, the growth rate, most of the economies in the world are going to experience a contraction, while India might, according as per to the latest forecast, India might register a growth of about 1.75%. But it's as of now only. We do not know how things are going to turn out. As Professor Lekha pointed out, the pandemic might peak in India in September or October. We do not know that. There's a lot of uncertainty. So the loss of income as of now itself is huge to cause a huge humanitarian crisis. So the buzzword today is this uncertainty for policymakers. We do not know when we will be able to resume to some sort of a normalcy, if not full-fledged normalcy. So it was in this context that, across the globe, policymakers, governments, and central banks are responding to this crisis. And in India too, we have seen the government and RBI responding to this pandemic. And barely 36 hours after the lockdown was announced, the finance minister came up with the package, fiscal relief package 1, where the finance minister announced income transfers through Jan Dhan Yojana accounts, women Jan Dhan account holders, pensioners, widows, and physically handicapped people, and also front loading of PM Kisan transfers. And also food and fuel were also were to be distributed free of cost for 3 months. That was announced. And NREGA, the wages were raised by about rupees 20. And there were some announcements related to employees provident fund, which was a relief for workers, employees, as well as some firms which employ these workers. So these were for the organized sector. So about 24% of the salary of the workers in establishments where establishments with less than 100 employees is to be paid by the government for the next 3 months, as it was announced on March 26th. So that is definitely a relief for the organized sector employees and also employers. And there were some announcements related to the Building and Construction Workers Welfare Act money, which has accumulated in those accounts. And this Construction Workers Welfare Act, that fund was there, and also District Mineral Fund, which are lying in the accounts. These were to be used by the states for fighting COVID-19, and these were broadly the components of the first fiscal package announced by the finance minister. So it was announced to be amounting to about 1.76 lakh crore rupees coming more than, but if you look at the figures, if you closely examine these components, we can see that, as I told you, many of these are already budgeted in the account, in the budget, included in the budget, and only some of the components are new announcements, and some of them are front loading of expenditure, like the transfers related to PM Kisan. So most of the economists concur on the fact that the total quantum of this fiscal stimulus comes to around 0.6 or 0.7% of GDP. So it compares poorly with, of course, poorly with that of the developed countries. Of course, we may not be able to, we may not be in a position to spend that much like the United States or the Western European countries, where the fiscal stimulus announced so far is about 10%. In US, it comes to around 20% of GDP. And ours is a paltry 0.6 or 0.7%, which is very small. Probably, I think the government is waiting to see the extent of damage this pandemic is going to cause. So, for about 2 weeks now, the media and economists and the general public are waiting for the second fiscal policy package, which might come out anytime soon. So, we are waiting for that, and hopefully there will be more announcements. And along with the government, the central bank, Reserve Bank of India, also came out with an announcement on March 27th. And the fact that RBI preponed its monetary policy committee meeting by 1 week and announced its monetary policy announcement 1 week early itself shows that the urgency and seriousness with which the central bank is seeing this situation. It saw the situation, and its announcements were basically to ensure liquidity in the system, to reduce the cost of funds, and to widen the monetary policy rate corridor, along with some regulatory easing, which was the need of the hour. So on the liquidity front, the CRR was cut by 100 basis points to 3. So it released about 1.37 lakh crore rupees into the system. And also there was an announcement of a term repo operations with a 3-year tenor amounting to about 1 lakh crores. And MSF, the marginal standing facility, was increased to 3% of SLR. That also would release or could release 1.37 lakh crore rupees into the system, amount total coming to about 3.4 lakh crore rupees into the system. So that was a significant step from the monetary authority. And the cost of funds were reduced. The repo rate was reduced to 4.4 by 0.75 basis points, and the reverse repo rate was reduced by 0.9 basis points. So this would reduce the cost of funds for the banks, and widening of monetary policy rate corridor was another interesting thing which RBI did. The corridor means the difference between the reverse repo rate and the repo rate, the marginal standing facility rate and the repo rate, it was widened so that banks will have lesser incentive to park their funds with the Reserve Bank. So it was a nudge to encourage banks to lend more. But we do not know how far banks will do that at this point of time. It is because, as we saw already, there is a lot of uncertainty in the atmosphere, in the air. Now, regulatory easing was also announced, which was very important. So, moratorium on term loans and working capital loans for 3 months was announced. It has given a relief for the people who are paying the EMIs, and also for the institutions. And for financial institutions also, it was very important. And a few other announcements were also made to help the financial institutions. And as we have mentioned in our EPW paper on this macro uncertainty, the government has resorted to Operation Twist, where the maturity pattern of government security is sought to be changed from short term to long term. So the RBI is continuing with that kind of operations. So this was the first packages, the fiscal and monetary side, and later on April 27th, uh, uh, March 20th, no, April 17th, I think, the Monetary Authority came out with another announcement, which is where the most important announcement was related to the targeted long-term repo operations, which is called TLTRO2, where the RBI found that the initially announced 1 lakh crore was used for purchasing the bonds of the best companies and public sector companies. So it was not reaching the mid-sized companies, small and medium-sized mutual funds and so on. So in order to help them, the RBI announced a TLTRO 2.0 version 2 to help the small and mid-sized mutual funds. But when it did it was for an amount of 50,000 crore rupees. So, but it was to be done in two tranches, and the first tranche was done last week. And now auction was done and now tender was announced last week for 25,000 crore rupees, and there was the response of the banking sector was lukewarm. Only 50% was about 12,500. There was demand only for about 12,500 crore rupees. So it looks like the 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 banking sector is not sure of lending to the mid-sized and small mutual funds where uncertainty is looming large. So that is a good, according to the RBI governor, it's a good signal. I mean, not a good signal. It's a good piece of information for the RBI to use for framing its future operations. And it also gives a feedback to the government how stressed out these mid-sized and small firms are already, and in the future too they are going to be affected. So we are waiting for more announcements from the government as well as from the RBI. So as Professor Lekha, so these are the announcements which are made already, and a little bit of feedback on them. As Professor Lekha pointed out already, these are unusual times. And even in usual times, we know for an ordinary Indian, it is crisis management on a daily basis. So when it is unusual times, we can imagine the extent of difficulty, the trouble which they would be facing. So this is perhaps the time which the government should think of, as Professor Lekha pointed out, think of monetizing the deficit, increase government expenditure, especially in health sector. There has been a long-standing demand, and the National Health Policy 2000 also speaks about it, where public expenditure on health is to be raised to 3% of GDP, which is currently at about 1.4%. So this is an opportunity for the government and as a society for all of us to increase the public expenditure on health. It should even go beyond 3%. And even on education, I think we need to spend more. One reason probably why Kerala has been able to tackle COVID-19 so far successfully is because of the prominence we as a society has given to education and health. So in that way, this Kerala model has to be a lesson for every other state. And there is an urgent need to raise this expenditure on health and education. which helps us to address these kind of problems. And that is welfare enhancing for sure. So one is to increase the public expenditure, which I want to suggest for the future, and also infrastructure, because in the near future demand is going to be less. Already our economy, as I told you initially, the demand level, the demand situation in the economy was low, and the steps taken already by the government and RBI were not helping to raise the demand level, the aggregate demand in the economy. So now, after COVID-19, the demand will definitely continue depressed, and of course, we have to uh, uh, look at the supply shock also. This is a demand as well as a supply shock. But for India, the demand will remain subdued, and we will have to. The government will have to step in to increase the demand level in the economy. So one is to increase its expenditure in health and education, and second is to increase the rate to continue, not continue, invest in infrastructure projects. And as of now, the government will have to help the poor, the needy, marginalized, the migrant laborers, all of them by transferring more cash into their accounts. So that is also going to be important. And probably the government, as Professor Lekha has pointed out in the article, there is a need for the government to act as an employer of last resort. The employment guarantee scheme has to be streamlined, and more funds has to be allotted. So this year's budget, what we have seen is a reduction in the allocation to the NREGA program. And now after the in the first package, following the COVID-19, the government has announced a raise, an increase in the wage rates by 20 rupees. Probably the government should think of increasing the wage rates much more, so that the people will benefit from that. Because otherwise, to benefit by a little 100 rupee or 200 rupee, the people will have to work over many months. So the total amount which the finance minister said, by which each worker will benefit about 2,000 rupees, it will be accrued only over a period of 1 year. So that is not of a big real help for the people. So the wage rates has to be increased, and the government will have to come up with more packages, more announcements to help the poor to avoid this humanitarian crisis. And also, I would like to, I will end by saying that the government will have to go beyond the FRBM Act. It will have to go beyond 3% deficit level, the ceiling, definitely. And by what quantum, there are different arguments. Some say that we will have to spend additional 7 to 10 lakh crores to tide over this pandemic. So that will come to about 4 to 5% of the GDP. So that we will have to come out with a clearer picture only once we peak the pandemic, and we are in a better position to speak about that. And also, we need to think of monetizing the deficits, and the government have to spend more in order to address this issue. With this, I think I will stop here, and I will wait for the questions. Thank you.
I just have this question to Lekha ma'am. Lekha ma'am, you were talking about the GDP and the fiscal deficit and things like that. How much do you think is the current GDP right now? Line.
Yeah, thanks, Shotha, for that question. It's a dynamic situation right now, and we are grappling with, arriving at a GDP number. That the methodological revisions and all, but right now, what we are doing is that we go for the sectoral estimations, and which are the sectors in which we need to keep the growth rate zero, or which
Yeah.
are the sectors in which we have to, go for a growth rate which is mild, and which are the sectors, like that we need to work at the disaggregated levels using the inflation rate and an assumed, growth rate, and we have to arrive at the number. And I think instead of we, predicting or forecasting or now casting that GDP, I think we need to wait for the CSO estimates. And I
Yeah.
think each of the states in our country, they are also quite grappling with this, because they have to come up with a number. What's a kind of impact of this economic disruption on the GDP or
Yeah.
GSDP. So that,
Yeah.
that process is going on now. And, IMF has come up with the estimation that the drag on the economic growth will be to the extent of the -3% that we are going to experience. And they also came up with base scenario, alternative scenario. So that's a way in which we do the forecasting. So let's not, jump the gun and give a figure, but, we are into the process and the situation is so dynamic, and we really don't know. And it all depends on the exit strategy also, the way our GDP is going to revive. So, to be on the safe side, or my limited point is, instead of expecting a V-shaped recovery, that's a sharp recovery,
Yeah.
I think we can go for, L or dynamic, because, we don't know even our potential output. It's a case of a macroeconomic uncertainty. And,
Yeah.
in the last week also, when I was talking, a related question was asked to me that, will we be able to, come up to our potential GDP? So I think,
Yeah.
Emmanuel, we also discussed in many of our one-to-one discussions that this potential GDP, that concept, it's
Yeah.
very hard. It's a macroeconomic uncertainty, and usually the econometricians or the economists, they grapple with the filters, the econometric methodology called the Kalman filters or Prescott filter, that HP filters, and
Yeah.
come up with with an estimation like, you take your GDP, take out the cyclicality in that GDP, and call the trend component as your potential. So from there, then you take that actual gap. So the potential minus actual. So these kind of uncertainties, we don't have an answer, but we grapple with a different kind of econometric methodology. So you tell your students that the situation is so dynamic, and you give it a go to their question, because it's very tough to answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True, ma'am. True.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thanks a lot.
Thank you,
Can I
Shiva.
ask one more question to
Please,
Emmanuel, sir?
please, next.
Please, there are a lot of questions. There are a lot of
Sir,
questions
one
available.
last question. One last question to Emmanuel, sir, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, sir, you just spoke about pumping a lot of money into the economy so that liquidity is more and things like that. What we actually get to hear time is government don't have money at all right now. And in one of the speakers talk also, I got to know that getting external funds is not a feasible idea right now. Now, having said that, and having known the fact that our government is financially very weak, and accumulating money is also very difficult. With all this, how government you think will pump much more money into the economy by
Yeah.
increasing the wage rate, and also
Yes, yes, yes,
putting
yes.
a lot of money into the
Yeah,
system?
I got the point. Yeah, what the government is doing as of now is it has front loaded the borrowing plan for the year. So this year, the union government is planning to borrow about 7.95 lakh crore rupees. So out of that, that's the fiscal deficit. So in the first half itself, the government has decided to borrow about 63% of that. So already, so usually maybe it happens over, it will be spread over more quarters. But this time the government has decided to front load this borrowing. So by looking at how this pandemic is coming out, the government will have to borrow more. So probably, let us hope that the pandemic will be gone in as quickly as possible, so that normalcy can return. So this is one thing which the government has done. And another thing I think what the government has done is to go for raising the ways and means advanced limit for the union as well as the states. So by these two measures, the government is trying to tide over the situation as of now. So probably government will have better plans once this uncertainty gives way to more clarity. Once we peak the curve. So As of now, it is borrowing, front loading the borrowing, and ways and means advance has been raised.
Okay, now,
okay?
okay, now we can go to the next participant. Now we can go to the next participant.
Yeah.
There is a question from Shyam Prakash from Central University of Kerala. And the question is, how will you conceive state versus market debate in the context of COVID?
Oh, Emmanuel is not there. Okay, Shyam, the role of state here, it's like we responded to the crisis, lockdown and excessive policing. But I think the role of the state in this moment of crisis should be more towards public health emergency and also towards science and technology rather than state responding in the form of excessive policing and the lockdown. So here I have a little bit of dissatisfaction regarding the way it is framed. And for me, the role of state at this moment should not be just confined to this excessive policing. And in this lockdown, what is a preparedness of the state or the union government in terms of increasing the public health infrastructure and how we are going to respond to the crisis met by the frontline warriors, the medical professionals, and also the impact of this lockdown policy on the economic disruptions, especially the small and medium term firms, and also the important thing is the humanitarian crisis which is mounting and this interstate migration and international migration. These are the center government's functions as per the constitutional assignment. So I look forward to strong answers for the role of state in terms of all these 4 points I mentioned, rather than just confining to the lockdown per se and the excessive policing, or just like observing the people are just stay home or something like that. And I leave it there. Yeah, hear you.
So I am Jelly Alex from Thorwell Newman College. I have a question to Professor Emmanuel Thomas. Okay. Professor Emmanuel, your presentation was very excellent and nice. And as you have mentioned, the most affected victims of the COVID-19 seems to be casually employed workers, especially daily workers. So, during the situation, a proper policy mix giving more emphasis on fiscal expansion rather than monetary is desirable, I think. What's your opinion regarding it?
Yeah. Jenny, you are absolutely right. This is the time when fiscal policy has to take the front seat. There is a general consensus among economists and policymakers that monetary policy has to take a back seat during this COVID, the pandemic times, because lowering of interest rates or increased liquidity are not going to help to revive the economy. So the need of the hour is more government expenditure to avoid this humanitarian crisis. You are absolutely right, Jenny. I had seen your question, in fact. Thank you, Jenny.
Okay, Emmanuel, you would like to take up the question?
I didn't hear his question. What was the question? Okay, see, already our banking sector was, especially the non-banking financial companies were facing serious problem in India, and there was a lot of liquidity related issues. You remember the previous problem, the slowing down of the economy was connected, or one of the factors behind that slowing down was the problem in the NBFC sector. You remember the IL and FC, the Divan Kuris, so many companies going bust, and the problems associated with that, and the government finding it difficult to capitalize them. So that problem was already there, and this health crisis is definitely going to make their books look very bad. So the Reserve Bank of India and the government will probably do something to save this banking sector. So already there are regulatory forbearance is announced, and a lot of things are being. RBI is doing a good job in taking care of these financial institutions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would like to add to point what Emmanuel was talking about. Can I?
Sure, sure.
Yeah, I was just coordinating with the people. One thing is like the recapitalization. Am I audible? That recapitalization is, it's creating a kind of moral hazard. We have gone ahead with the recapitalization in the beginning because
True.
as per the Basel norms, our capital requirement was not enough. So we needed to infuse the funds into that or liquidity. But, once it is fine. But if you're doing again and again, of course, I can understand that there is a twin balance sheet crisis we need to grapple with. That's the cleansing of the bank balance sheet, cleansing of the corporate balance sheet, and also we are having a strict fiscal the deficit norm. So when it happens from all the sectors, I don't know, I'm not sure whether recapitalization is going to be the right kind of policy response, because it's
Okay.
going to create a moral hazard.
Moral hazard.
Yeah.
True.
Emmanuel, I will flag 2 points and over to you. Okay. Yeah. First I want to respond to this bond. Usually, when it comes to the financing, the bond is quite a bit of important or a significant instrument to deal with. And I remember the Rathin Roy's article where he talked about this Corona bond, which is quite similar to the consoles, the war bond floated during the wartime. So the playing with the maturity pattern of the bonds and going for the long bonds, that's quite relevant. And our RBI also has put forward this Operation Twist, in which we go for this long-term bonds, and we were buying long-term bonds and selling the short term. So playing with the structure of maturity of the bonds is quite relevant, because
True.
it can postpone our refinancing risk, and that's quite a relevant thing. And second, regarding the China, it all depends upon the economic diplomacy rather than economics alone. That's what is my take, because there is a retreat of globalization and there is protectionist waves. So how we will deal with that international thing depends broadly on it's beyond economist consideration. It's an economic diplomacy question. And regarding this unemployment, I think Emmanuel will be better to answer you, Indira. And thank you for the question.
Sir, the unemployment sector is not informal sector. What I'm asking is,
Okay.
informal sector workers unemployment issue is never recorded.
See, unemployment, lockdown means economy is suspended. So that means unemployment is there. So that problem is that is what lockdown is all about. So in India, unemployment has risen from about 6% to 23-24% already. So once the lockdown is lifted, this people will slowly start working. They will be able to work again. But of course, it will depend on the demand level in the economy and the supply chain constraints, etc. So we cannot say much about that at this point of time when their economy is suspended.
Yeah, and I would like to add to that Emmanuel's point. Yes, we won't be able to tell it empirically also, because this also we think talked about in our one-to-one meetings with Emmanuel, that there is no data. There is no data in the informal sector, and only one good study or partially good study on this informal sector and the demonetization, what Indira was pointing out, that was by Geeta Gopinath and her team, based on the satellite data, like based on the luminosity of the night light.
True.
Yeah, because below state or the sub-state level in the informal sector, how to capture the economic growth, we don't have the data, and they were using the satellite data or the luminosity or the nightlight intensity to capture the thing. And it's a good read. I think Indira must have read that already. But that's the kind of studies we have. Other than that, we have to grapple with this data paucity, the data
and
limitations.
This highlights the importance of data also.
Absolutely.
Yeah, ask.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask a question, ma'am?
Yeah, definitely, Anupama, go ahead.
Yeah, ma'am. In the situation, many countries are restructuring their policies on employment. Many countries are restructuring their policies on employment. They are accommodating their own persons rather than from outside. So it will affect us also. No, Indians are mainly depending upon other countries for employment, and it will affect our economy also. No, restructuring the policies on employment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Emmanuel, you
Yeah.
would like to respond?
Yeah, I will
Then I will
give
come in.
my
Yeah.
comments and you can follow them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
Anupama, it's very valid point. The world is going to be, it might be more protective, and the movement of people might, may not be as much as it used to be. And for example, sitting in Kerala now, Kerala is bringing back its migrant workers, those who wish to come back. This week we are starting that during this pandemic. So definitely it is going to be an issue. We will have to frame appropriate policies, and every crisis, I feel that every crisis is an opportunity also. These workers who have some skills, who have some exposure, when they come back, we can make use of this human capital to 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 restart our economy, to build our economy, and that is an opportunity. I think that is the way to look at it.
Yeah,
That is my take on that.
yeah,
So, for
absolutely.
example, in Kerala, if we can improve the business environment here to promote, and the government takes steps to promote investment, I'm sure that this people, workers who are coming back from Gulf or elsewhere, will be a huge asset for our economy, and they will be able to perform well here because of their exposure and the skills which they have acquired.
Yes.
Yes, over
Yes,
to you.
yes, Emmanuel. It was quite satisfying. But I just wanted to add one more point to it.
Sure.
Anupama's question is regarding that reverse migration, as you rightly pointed out. It's going to be a big thing, especially within India. I think Kerala has to face this reverse migration, and how well we are going to respond. In terms of investment, as you rightly pointed out. But broadly, when we think about our external sector, I think discussions are just confined to how we, respond to this foreign investment, whether it is in the foreign direct investment or the foreign portfolio investment. But over the years, there is a transition from the investors' portfolio to this foreign direct investment, that we are increasing the caps in which the foreign
Okay.
investors can come and invest and all. And regarding this foreign direct investment and the foreign portfolio is little hot money. So we are focusing on the foreign investment rather than the other components of your balance of payment. Like, I'm not talking about X minus M component right now regarding the trade policies, but as Anupama pointed out, we have quite a bit of services, trade in services, in which the people work outside, and the remittances and those kind of thing. I think we don't have that serious policy thinking regarding that, but ours is quite just confined to what is happening to the hot money, which is responding to the differentials in the interest rate, and also on the foreign direct investment. But along with these two components, along with the trade policy, I think this is a moment in which we need to think about the trade in services also. That's quite an important point that Anupama was highlighting, and thanks for the question.
I'm still figuring things out. So we've been hearing of how the US China trade war shall increase after the US elections too. So in the current situation, do you think it would be a wise idea for India to take the mover advantage, the first mover advantage in international trade at this particular point? Can our economy survive that?
Such a tough question you're asking. I think, Emmanuel, I'm missing Reggie, because Reggie would have been the right, he works in RIS and he works on the trade policy. So I would like you to go ahead and read the e-book which was produced by RIS. I think Reggie Thomas is
Yes, yes.
quite significant in that collating that book, and there are a lot of literature coming up on the trade aspects. I think you just take a look at that reference, because the things will be clear to you. But for me, I think I will just make a limited point that it all depends upon your economic diplomacy and the wave of the protectionism which Emmanuel was pointing out. And so it's all depend upon that retreat of globalization and the protectionist wave which is happening at the global level, which decides things than at the micro level. And that's my limited point, and I would like to end there, because that's not my expertise, because I work on the macro policy. But trade, I think you will get more insight from the book produced by RIS. And over to you, Emmanuel, if you would like to supplement something.
No, I don't have much to talk on this point. Of course, trade is important, as all of us know.
Yeah.
That is what we can say. And
Hello?
the important point is that there's uncertainty at this point of time. A lot of
Absolutely.
uncertainty. We
Yeah.
do not know how the post-COVID
Can
world
I?
will look like. Fiscal package comes to about 0.6 or 0.7% of GDP, and nobody is getting huge amounts of money. It's for their survival. So when the entire economy is locked down, what the government is trying to do through these transfers is to give them money for their survival. So that is what is being done at this point of time. So productive investment, we will have to think of other policies and other channels for doing that post-COVID, not at this point of time. That is my take on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I go with you. Yeah, Anupama, that the point is that we need to refocus on the revenue spending right now. Because so far we thought that the revenue expenditure is all bad and we need to control our revenue deficit and we need to go for the capital formation. But at this moment, I think this is the re-emergence or the refocus on revenue spending. That revenue expenditure is quite relevant here, and as rightly pointed out by Emmanuel, we can think about the capital formation as a post-COVID strategy. But you have to get your focus on
True.
revenue spending. That's quite relevant right now. Yeah, thank you.
Lega ma'am. Lega ma'am.
Yeah,
Let me just ask you one question.
definitely.
Okay, there is a question from one participant, Salma, and she is connecting with the remittance issues of Kerala with the the problem of Kerala and the remittance. Can you comment something on that?
On the remittances.
Because Kerala is going to face fall in remittance in the coming years. So how will this affect our economy in general?
Okay. I really don't know, Salma.
I will start
Yeah,
and you can
yeah.
add if you have something to add.
Absolutely.
Because
Go
yesterday
ahead,
I was
go ahead.
listening to that Professor Iridharajan's talk, where
Yeah.
he was saying that Kerala is receiving about 85,000 crores as remittances in 2018. So
Yeah.
what he said is that probably for 2020, this fiscal also we will remain at that level. There will not be a fall. There will not be a rise also. So probably that is going to happen. We are not sure. Again, uncertainty. That is what I definitely Kerala economy will get affected, and my hunch is that the remittances will fall. But Professor Rajan is an expert, so he is saying that it will stay at the 2018 levels. But my offhand feeling is that it will fall because of this problem and the fall in the crude oil prices which we have been witnessing. So a lot of economic activity will go down in the Gulf region and remittances will definitely come down. That is my take on that.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask one question?
Okay, please continue.
Hello?
Okay, continue.
Okay. So we know that. Hello?
Yes, ask.
Okay. India, a country like India, is mainly focused on tourism. So definitely we know that after this pandemic, it is going to be affected. Tourism sector is going to be affected. So what kind of steps we can take to survive from this? Especially states like Kerala will definitely strive out of it. Tourism. My question is about tourism.
Yeah, Emmanuel, it's a sector-specific question.
See,
Thanks
we
to
are
the-
not even
yeah.
able to step out of our house, and you are talking about tourism now.
Yeah, Shruti. Yeah, we have to dream that we should keep our fire burning, that we will travel, when everything is, quite well. But the thing is that you're right, that we need to have sector-specific measures related to aviation, related to tourism, and related to the other kind of, entertainment sectors. So it all depends on the exit strategy in which we design these three important things. One, this tourism, as rightly pointed out to you by you. The second is the aviation sector, and the third is entertainment sector. So I think we need to wait because we are grappling with, the
Exactly.
human tragedy, and that's the priority, and in which we open up our, these crucial sectors, isn't it, Emmanuel?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's
Yes.
at least we are 6 months away
Hello.
from
The
exactly.
question.
Your
Yeah,
question is
Shruti,
very
yeah.
relevant, but who will be willing to travel at this
Hello.
point of time? That is the question.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
maybe
Shruti,
after
yeah.
6 months,
Yeah,
things
yeah,
will
yeah.
Hello.
Can I
normalize.
into
Yeah,
it,
Shruti,
please?
I just wanted to tell that, you are concerned about the livelihood.
Exactly.
That is quite, I can understand that it's a livelihood question you asked.
Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
not about
So
that
many people.
exuberance. Yeah. But as that, I think in the Emmanuel's presentation, he has pointed out, at this moment, it is only that universal basic income transfer can help, because employer or employment and the kind of participation income by engaging in an economic activity is not the way we can respond right now. So Shruti is concerned about livelihood. It has to be
Exactly.
addressed to the income transfers, but we cannot open the sector unless we control the pandemic. Yeah.
Hello. Excuse me. Hello.
Can I add something to it, please?
Hello.
May I get in? Can we
Hello.
go for the last question?
Yeah. Hello. Just can I end with this question? Hello.
Okay, continue.
Please ask.
Hello. Like I would like to. I was actually coming to ask about the universal basic income, which Legamam actually spoke right now. So, will there be the DNB paradox going to affect India if we are actually going to going with this unemployment income or universal basic income? Like, what about the effect of DNB paradox?
Yeah, Noel, thanks for that question. Had it been asked to me before Corona in the BC era, then I would have told that, we should go for this participation income because that's what all heterodox economists believe, that this employment policy can revive the economy. But right now, I think it's a judicious mix of both basic income and the participation income which is required, and that's the only way out because economy, the kind of policy response is lockdown. Here we cannot think of anything other than giving and not only the basic income but also the transfers of food. In the presentation of Emmanuel, he has pointed out that our the fiscal package, one of the components was the releasing food. So that's it, because the time is different right now to think about a participation income. Yes. Over to you, Emmanuel.
Yes, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi
Thanks,
everyone.
Noel.
I think it's time. There are lots of questions are there, but we do not have much time to answer all these questions. So let's wind up. And today, is it okay, Lekana?
I can hear you. Tell me.
Okay. So let's wind up the session. Okay.
Oh, absolutely. You can share our Twitter handle, Emmanuel's and mine, to all the participants that if they
Okay.
want to talk to us, we are available on Twitter.
Okay,
Yeah,
ma'am.
that's it. And thank you so much. Yeah.
Sure.
Today, okay, ma'am. Yeah. Today we witnessed an engaging session on COVID-19 and my macroeconomic uncertainty. You guys might have really benefited from the webinar, I think. Central College Columbus Study and the Department of Economics in particular is proud to have hosted this event. We conclude this session with a word of thanks by Professor Stalin. And over to you, Stalin.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. And both the talk started with a debate, life versus livelihood. And as far as life is concerned, there are health workers who are working in the forefront. When it comes to the livelihood, then our role comes to the forefront. When this struggle for life is over, when this pandemic is over, the faculties and the students those who are interested in economics, they have to come forward to work on safeguard the livelihood of the people. So the world is looking at India, how we are handling this pandemic. And the world will also look at India, how we will overcome this issue and we will emerge as an economic superpower. So there we have a role. That's why Department of Economics has organized this webinar, and we have got a very wonderful participation from around the country, and on an average 200 plus participants were online. So now it's time to thank all the people, those who are part and parcel of this webinar. As you are aware that this webinar was inaugurated by Minister Tilothaman, who is the Minister for Food and Civil Supplies. He is very busy dealing with the food supply, but he was very kind enough to inaugurate our webinar. So, with thanks from the bottom of my heart, I extend thanks to the Minister. And we are truly blessed with two eminent speakers, Dr. Lekha Chakravarti first. She's from National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, and we are truly blessed to have you as a resource person. She talked about that we have to think out of box because we have a Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act, which restrict the fiscal deficit to restricted to 3% of the GDP. So she talked about that this is the time to use the escape clause where we can increase this fiscal deficit so that the government can pump more money into the economy. And she also highlighted the fiscal decentralization and the flexibility. That she also mentioned about Kerala, where this is running very successfully because the local self-government, when they are given autonomy to spend, then they are very close to people and they know what to do. So in that cases, it works, really works. That's why Kerala could ride out this pandemic issues. So she mentioned about fiscal decentralization and flexibility. And at the end, she could clearly explain at this point of time why fiscal policy is more effective than monetary policy. And you answered very well to all the questions raised by the participants, and all the faculty of Department of Economics and Policy College and all the participants are indebted to you. So thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, Stalin. Thank you.
Mr. Emmanuel Thomas, he is also a friend of the Justin George, who is the coordinator of this event. He also started with the life versus livelihood. I also want to mention that he is a doctoral fellow at JNU and he is also an assistant professor. He said it rightly. If livelihood is not safeguarded, more life is going to lose because of the loss of livelihood. That was the right remark. He actually was focusing on the stimulus package that the finance minister Nirmala Sitharaman has just announced so far. Close to 1% of the gross domestic product of India, it's a 1.76 lakhs. So that's the stimulus package, and also what the central bank did to pump money supply in an economy by changing the reserve ratios. So all those things were detailed, they were discussed in detail. And he also mentioned at the end that the government should increase public expenditure in health, education and infrastructure, and also should pump more money to the people, those who are poor and vulnerable. And the session was also very interesting and informative, and that was followed by a question answer session. So many raised questions, very interesting questions. I thank all those participants, and this webinar may not have materialized with the support of our management. So I take this time to thank our manager, Father Anthony Arakel, Associate Manager, Father Joseph Anthony Palliparambil, our Principal, Dr. Professor Valentine De Cruz, and Vice Principals and IQAC Coordinators. So they are giving continuous support for all the activities that the department is taking. And the next, I would like to thank Dr. Sumudra Franklin, who is the HOD of Department of Economics, She is continuously helping and guiding us to do such wonderful programs for the department and the students. So thank you. Professor Justin George is the coordinator of this webinar. So he really did a wonderful work. Really, he worked hard day and night to make this a grand event. So the success is measured by the participation and also the eminent speakers who were also part of this seminar. So he really did a wonderful job. So thank you, Justin sir. And the Professor Sibi was the anchor of this. So he did it in a very nice way. So thank you, Sibi sir, and my colleague Niji and colleague. In that this webinar was very wonderfully organized one. And once again, I thank each and everyone. Thank you, everyone.
And you did well.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Shall we conclude?
Sure, sure, sir.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Okay, you can all disconnect. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay.